November, when daylight lasts for 6 hours. Will you guys just look? Look what happened. Will you look? It's 69 degrees in Western New York in the middle of November. You better friggin' believe I'm gonna get my ass outside on the bike, because this is not gonna happen again for a long time. I've been stuck indoors for over a month because it's rained for what seems like every day for the last 6 years of my life. But I'm gonna go out and get out on a ride. These are actually necessary today. So let's go. So this ride has been a much needed mental health decompression after over a month of being stuck indoors and just everything 2020, right? I mean, it's just, for lack of a better term, it's been unprecedented times for all of us, and I think we're all struggling in our own ways. And I'm not trying to diminish those people who are actually struggling major health incursions and financial issues in terms of perhaps you've lost your business or you've lost your job. I don't want to diminish any of that in this video because my heart very truly goes out to you. I do not know how to fix that, and when I think about it, it is overwhelming. The only thing that I can say is that I do truly care and feel for you, even if I've never met you. But even for those of us who don't have major catastrophes in our lives, I don't think we can really diminish what we are going through as well. And it comes to this kind of idea of motivation. I think this time of year is difficult for everybody in terms of motivation as it is. The days are getting shorter. Daylight savings time for us here, I mean, the northern hemisphere already, and then, you know, if your areas like mine is just subject to poor weather, there's already kind of that seasonal affective disorder and other such constructs that keep us a little bit under our top mental condition. And if you look around on social media, whether it's here on YouTube or it's on Instagram or Facebook, it looks like everybody around us, except for us, are just full of motivation, right? Everything is always fantastic and they're ready and raring to go all the time. But the truth is that's filtered reality, right? They're only putting up the best parts of themselves in their lives for the world to see. And it gives the illusion that maybe some people just have 24/7 motivation and we just aren't those people. And the reality is that's a lie. Motivation is fleeting for everybody. There is not a single person on this planet, save for maybe somebody with, I don't know, some sort of brain damage, literally, I'm not trying to make a joke of it, that actually is not at all subject to the natural waves of hormones and life and so on and so forth. Even the most privileged people in the world are subject to having their mentality turned upside down for whatever reason, right? And I think about it in terms of being an athlete and trying to find motivation, and I don't think we can underestimate how severe we are going to be impacted. It hasn't hit us yet in terms of 2020 and everything that's gone on with the pandemic. in terms of what's going to happen when we are really all penned indoors, when the winter weather is just not going to make it conducive for us to get outside or even go to these places that are going to be closed or locked down in certain areas, to just decompress, right? Decompress from life. You know, what is it? Eat, sleep, work, repeat for many of us in the winter time, and it's just going to make it worse. And I think many people right now are looking to find motivation. And there are thousands of books written on this and probably hundreds of thousands of videos and podcasts about this subject. But the reality is I don't think you're going to find motivation. I think that you need to rely on other systems. When motivation is lacking, I think you need to just take it easy on yourself and realize that it's okay to not feel motivated to do things. And there are other systems and techniques that you can rely upon. And I'll talk about that when I get home because I am running out of daylight. But in terms of going easy on yourself, even if you're talking about pure endurance sport, which I focus on a lot on this channel, I think so many of us fall into this trap that we feel like we need to, be on our bike or running or swimming. We got to be putting in 15 hours a week or else we're guilty, or we're going to lose those fitness gains. And the reality is that's not actually true. You can give yourself a break. Today is a good example of that for me, where I have drastically diminished my volume over the past month because there really is no objective, right? There's no goal on the calendar, and I am just kind of looking for ways to not blow my brains out mentally because there's a lot of stress at work. So I need to remove something from my life, and I have to remove right now the discretionary items being sport. So I haven't spent more than maybe an hour and 15 minutes to 90 minutes on a bike or on a run in over a month. And I come out today and I'm 3 hours into probably a 4-hour ride here. I'm having a blast and I feel strong. I feel stronger than I did when I was putting in 15 to 20 hours a week during the summer, just putting in long rides all the time. Yes, my rides on the bike now are far more focused. There's far more intentionality. There is, interval training, which is certainly important. You have to do that in balance as well, but it goes to show that I don't need to be putting 15 to 20 hours a week on the bike to stay fit and stay healthy. I can drop that down to 8 or 10, and if I do it with purpose and balance it with my life and make the good choices, my fitness is no worse than it was 3 months ago when I was riding twice as much, and in some respects it might even be better. So, giving myself a break, giving myself the ability to drop back a little bit when the motivation isn't there and to rely on those other systems, which I'll talk about when I get home. I think it's working out, and this video, I want to encourage people to do the same, because it's not going to get easier over the next several months, and we don't know how long we're in this for, but the worst part of the year is yet to come for most of us, the winter months from November up through March, April. Give yourself a break. Let me get myself home, because that little white blob back there, that's dropping pretty damn quickly, and I'm going to get stuck in the dark, so I should probably go. November, when daylight lasts for 6 hours. All right, well, fueled, showered, bike put away, hot beveraged, and ready for a fireside chat, talking about motivation, because I spent a lot of time thinking about that today on my ride, and just kind of realizing the state of affairs that we all find ourselves in right now, just exacerbating what we've already fought with, I think, for many of us. If you're watching this around the time I'm posting, it's November. So many of us as endurance athletes struggle this time of year because the events are over, right? We've come out of the summer for most of us. We've come out of a very event-heavy, except not in 2020, season, and then there's nothing really short-term on the calendar for us. Now, there usually is a potential to maybe travel. If that's something really important to you, you can travel to an event in a more amenable climate. But that's even off the table as well. Now, as an aside, if you are a goal-oriented person, you are really struggling wrapping your head around not having something to work toward, I would recommend looking into some of the virtual events. I think they're getting a lot more legitimacy behind them and a lot more backing as they hit their stride. So don't knock them until you actually try them out. I've heard a lot of great things. Obviously, there's Zwift for racing, but there's also more sanctioned events. There's triathlon events. There are virtual runs. So check those out. If you really need something on your calendar to keep yourself on track, I would recommend checking those out. But failing that, I think it's very common, you see it all the time, that athletes just let their treadmills, their bikes, their squat racks, whatever you have in your house, they just turn into very expensive laundry racks, right? They just start to collect clothes and sit in the corner and collect dust. It's not unique. It's something that people struggle with all the time. And I think it's because when motivation wanes, people just are waiting to feel like it. They're waiting for motivation to magically shine upon them and feel like doing things again. You know, they let themselves decompress after a hard in-season, and then they just assume that the fire is just going to end up under their ass, and they're going to want to get back on the bike, on the treadmill, in the pool, whatever it is. Problem is if you wait to feel motivated, you're going to wait a long time. You might wait forever and never come back to the sport, but more often than not, you wait until something extrinsic forces you to get back into the swing of things. And very often what happens is come March and people are looking at races that they like to do every year. Oh shit, I'm behind the 8 ball. Now I've got to pull an all-nighter and cram for the test in terms of my training and try to force fitness fast. And then it just kind of ruins the experience because you're constantly fighting from behind in terms of your training, right? The people who are doing well in those early season races are the people who have not been remiss in their off-season winter-based training. Yes, if you are a historically trained athlete, you can get fitness back quickly, but it's certainly not ideal. And imagine your potential if you weren't constantly cramming in what you should have been doing over 3 months in 3 weeks. So how do we offset that? Well, it's not waiting for motivation. It's not waiting to feel like it. Now, what I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to say that this is some crazy seminal idea. You know, I came up with this on my own, but it's a logical inference. I'm sure this similar information is out there either in books or in talks, whatever it is. So I'm not saying that this is absolutely mind-blowing material, but I think it helps to be reminded of these things to realize that there is a way around it, right? Back to saying give yourself a break. It's give yourself a break on the mentality, but there's still a way that you can actively get yourself back on the right track while not beating yourself up for being a piece of shit because you're just not motivated to do something. That's counterproductive. That negative self-talk thing, it doesn't serve anybody. So what kind of steps can you take to get back on the wagon, so to speak, and get in control of the training, the things that are really important to you? And when I look at the idea of like the impetus or the incentive to do something, I kind of look at it on a spectrum, right? Way over here in our happy place, that's motivation. That's where ease and friction and just the drive is all aligned, right? The barrier to entry to do those tasks is limited to preparatory activities, right? When you're motivated to get out and run or ride, it's as simple as throwing on your shoes or getting your bike out and zipping out the door. You are ready to go. It's super easy. But when that motivation isn't there, then you start moving to the other portion of the spectrum. And way on the other side here, this is discipline. This is where the things that we don't want to do live, but we know we need to do them. And we should be no strangers to discipline. If you've ever punched a clock for somebody else, or even punched a clock for yourself, you understand that there are certain tasks that you just don't want to do. But if you don't do them, there will be negative consequences, both real and perceived. That's why you do them anyway, because you just don't want to face those negative consequences. I'm sorry to break the news to you, but if you're in a bit of a rut and you're having a hard time getting on the bike, on the treadmill, in the pool, whatever your sport of choice is, you're gonna have to live over here for a little while. You're going to have to realize that if this is important to you, you're going to have to do things that you do not want to do. You're just going to have to rip off the Band-Aid and do it. But there are some tools, and there is kind of a light at the end of the tunnel here, because in the middle of the spectrum, that's habit.
And habit is an excellent fallback position because if you've worked through this discipline phase, you may already have done that and you realize the truth of this statement. If you've worked through that discipline for that 30 days to build the habit and you've really been diligent in keeping that habit, then you're going to live here in the middle where it's not really that you feel like it, but it's not that you don't feel like it either. It's just something that you do. Like brushing your teeth in the morning. I don't think anybody really has to rely on brute force discipline to go into the bathroom and brush their teeth or to make a cup of coffee or whatever habitual thing that you do is. And I don't think anybody's like, yeah, I'm gonna go brush my teeth today. I'm excited. I mean, maybe you're jazzed about oral hygiene. Good for you. But I think most people aren't on those two extremes for those things that have become habitual. You can say the same thing about the training for your endurance sport. Getting yourself from discipline into habit is a great place to land because when motivation wanes, then you just kind of land in that habit loop where you're just comfortable and you keep up on the things that are important to you. And a few tips that I can share in order to help build good habit are pretty obvious things, but they're worth restating and giving a reminder of because I think sometimes we forget the most obvious things that we have at our disposal. So first, when you're over here in the discipline cave here, you need to do a couple of things, right? One can surround building a ritual around those discipline items. And that's blocking off time, blocking off space to do those tasks. So if it's going out for a run, make sure that you have a particular time blocked off for whatever days of the week. If you want to run 4 days a week, then block off 4 specific days that you do not have other obligations during the week and block off that hour, that 90 minutes, however long it is. That time needs to be pretty much sacred for those particular tasks. And it's just non-negotiable. That's what the ritual is. That's how you're going to turn that discipline into a habit, is by making it very ritualistic. Not giving yourself the option to say no. This is what I'm doing. There's really, barring some kind of health or safety emergency, this is what I'm doing at that time, and no is not an option. It's not I don't feel like it. This is what I have to do, or there will be negative consequences. The consequences are that you won't perform the way that you want to perform. It could cost you a race. It could cost you falling off the back and trying to fight your way home alone on a group ride. Whatever it is, there are consequences if you do not perform these tasks in this manner. You do not want to be on the back foot in terms of your fitness come springtime. Build in small rewards for completing that task. They don't even have to be extra rewards. Maybe tying something that you already enjoy doing to that disciplined task would be the reward that you need. If you have a favorite show that you like to watch on Netflix or on cable, you're not allowed to watch that until you finish your run or your ride or your swim. It may seem harsh and childish, but the reality is that type of stuff works. For some people, it's as simple as a dopamine hit, walking up to a calendar and giving yourself a nice checkbox for completing your workout for the day or getting that green stripe on Training Peaks. Whatever works, that's going to help build a reward system that's going to push you from discipline into habit. Another thing that you should do, and I would recommend this to pretty much any athlete, even if you're not struggling with motivation, build in a minimum acceptable standard. And what I mean by that is that a number of us as just high-performing, driven people tend to think that if we miss our mark somewhere, everything is ruined. If you are rushing around at work and then you eat a sleeve of Oreos out of the vending machine, well, now all of your good nutrition and dietary habits are ruined, right? You miss a workout for the week and your fitness is ruined, you're a complete disaster, so I may as well throw the baby out with the bathwater. Rationally, we know that's silly, but we do that. So the way that you can kind of get out of that negative thinking is to build a minimum acceptable standard. So let's say your training weeks are built around 10 hours per week of training. Whatever that number is, it really doesn't matter the number itself. But think of the worst case scenario. Things go sideways at work. You've got parent-teacher conferences, or one of the kids gets sick, or whatever, life things come up. What is the bare minimum amount of time with the world on fire that you can commit to your training? Is it 4 hours? Is it 5 hours? Figure out what that number is and have that be your fallback position for the minimum acceptable standard. So maybe you didn't make your 10 hours, but you damn well made those 5 hours that you guaranteed you would do, and you know what fluff you're going to cut out of that, and you're going to focus on the most impactful work for that 5 hours, and you can still have that sense of completion. I didn't do perfectly this week, but I got my minimum in. I'm good to go. I know that my fitness isn't going to suffer too much, and I can move on and do better the next week. Another thing is customizing your environment. You need to make space for important things in your life, whether it's a hobby or sport, whatever it is. You need to make sure that there's a place for it. You've got a small corner where you get to store and organize your stuff so that it's easy to grab your shoes or your helmet or whatever those little bits and bobs are you need. Or you've got a nice permanent setup for your trainer. If that's that important to you, or your treadmill, make sure it's there and available so that you're not having reasons or barriers to entry to do the things that you know that you're supposed to be doing to build those habits. If you constantly have to drag things out of every corner of the house, and then something goes wrong or you can't find something, all of a sudden that hour or 90 minutes you have blocked off has been cut in half, and then why bother, right? You assume that you can't do the whole thing, so why bother? We'll try again tomorrow. If you have a nice customized space that removes the friction, make things easy, make it obvious, make it rewarding, make it satisfying, you'll be far more successful into turning this into habit. And the last thing that's important to think about is tying your actions to your identity. And this is a concept that I read in a book called Atomic Habits a couple years ago, and it was so profound in its simplicity that it stuck with me ever since. And I'm going to misquote the reference, but to paraphrase, the idea was that there was two individuals actually trying to break a habit in this case, and they were individuals who had quit smoking. And the two individuals are offered a cigarette, and one responds, "No, thank you, I quit smoking." And the second individual remarks, "No, thank you, I don't smoke." Now that seems like a subtle difference in semantics, but mentally it's extremely profound, because that second person does not identify as a smoker. They can't possibly take that cigarette because it just does not reconcile with their identity as somebody who doesn't smoke. Whereas that first person, they're coming from a place of scarcity. Well, I'm depriving myself of that cigarette because, I'm kind of committed to this idea that I'm not going to smoke anymore. There's a huge difference in how you approach things when you identify with that. So if your sport is important to you, identify as an athlete. There's no minimum acceptable barrier to being an athlete. Let go of that bullshit. So many people think there's this imposter syndrome that comes with calling yourself an athlete, right? If you're not at the tippy top of your field, if you're not an elite level cyclist or runner or swimmer or whatever, then you can't possibly call yourself an athlete because that's just too arrogant, right? It's bullshit. If you train and you work hard and you work to develop your sport, and fitness and health is important to you, then you're a damned athlete. Act like one. Not to be rude, but that's the bottom line, right? You're gonna make good food choices because you're an athlete. You're going to get on the bike and train because you're an athlete. You're going to throw on your shoes and go out for a run because you're an athlete. And that's what athletes do. If you're just a person who, swim, bikes, and run, well, I guess I should go do my training because, it seems like the right thing to do so I can swim, bike, and run. No, you're a damn athlete. Act like one. And it seems harsh and it seems kind of silly and it seems like some mental trickery. But the reality is once you flip that switch in your brain and identify with that part of yourself that you find to be important, your mentality around doing those things and the discipline and the habit required to do those things, it will change tremendously. And I firmly believe that once you push back through discipline and habit, that will expedite pushing you back into motivation. Don't wait for motivation to come to you. Don't wait to feel like it. If you keep that habit loop up, and you see the gains and the rewards of doing those things that you should be doing to, meet your ends as an athlete, then you will find motivation far more quickly than somebody who's just waiting for some kind of osmosis to drill it into their head. But I'm not saying this because I've completely nailed this, right? I suffer just like everybody else. I've had periods of low motivation, and if I can take a step back and reflect on it, like I'm doing right now, I'm far more successful in coming out the other side. And sometimes you just need a reminder. Right? I think that the biggest thing is make sure you're doing these things because they're important to you. Make sure that there's some kind of intrinsic drive to do those. If you're engaging in endurance sport because you think it makes you look cool, or you're looking for somebody else to give you a pat on the back, that's only going to take you so far. So make sure in considering all of this, that your passions are aligned with you and not somebody else's vision of what you should be doing. But I'm assuming if you're watching this channel and you're watching this video, you've already done that. You've already realized that this is important to you. Don't be reluctant to identify as an athlete outwardly. Tell people, be proud of it. I'm an athlete. This is what I do. This is important to me. This is why I make sacrifices. This is why I rely on discipline to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get my workout in, even if I don't feel like it. This is why I make healthy food choices, and so on and so forth. And this is just a yearly reminder, right? This may well be the boot in the ass you need to hear right now. This is the boot in the ass I need to hear right now. I spent a good portion of my ride today reflecting on this and really thinking about it and want to get it out. And in saying it out loud and putting it on YouTube, I kind of hold myself accountable to these same ideas, not just paying lip service, but practicing what I preach. But I do hope that it was helpful for some of you out there, maybe even most of you out there that are struggling with a lack of motivation for the time being, 2020, November, all of that stuff. My heart truly goes out to those of you, like I said before, that might be fighting through health issues from the pandemic or otherwise, or dealing with some kind of major financial crisis or work crisis. Obviously, this is not going to necessarily apply to you. Nobody's telling you to pick yourself up by your bootstraps right now if you've been handed a raw deal by everything going on. But in a general sense, I hope these ideas are helpful. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button. It helps the channel out quite a bit. Subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for making it to the end of my long-winded cathartic video. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. See ya.